It is the Anfield Wrap. It's Neil Atkinson with Harriet, Mo Stewart and Phil Blundell. Soon, but not right now, there will be me talking to Ian Salmon about Billy Kenny, which is a bit left field. That is to come, but we start off talking about Dominik Szoboszlai, Phil. It's a massive move from Liverpool. It came a little bit from nowhere. It wasn't a surprise to me. That's not me being smug after the event. I felt that if they were going to recruit into that position, they needed a sort of profile and player that Szoboszlai fits quite nicely in terms of creativity. Are you excited?
Yeah, I am. I'm very excited about it. It feels like it's an opportunity. I think it's a bit opportunistic in that one of the things you've heard for quite a while about how Liverpool do transfers is there's a list and there's a number of players on it that they like, and it sort of feels like 2 weeks ago this probably isn't something that they necessarily thought they would have done on, the 3rd of July. But on the 26th, 27th of June or whatever it is, they've suddenly realised this is a thing. And I don't know, maybe that it might even be as simple as they didn't know the release clause was there until a week ago, and then all of a sudden it's like, hang on, can we do this? And then they've got it done. They've gone out. They know he's a footballer that they liked. They've obviously seen him play. They know stuff about him, and it feels like they've gone, hang on, there's an opportunity here. We can get this done. You don't have to worry about teams sort of going, we'll sell him when we've done this, because they literally have no say in the matter because there's a release clause. And I think that's one of the things in football at the minute. There's a lot of sort of dominoes waiting to fall into place, whereas you don't need a domino with this. You just need.
So do you think you think that they might 2 weeks ago might not have thought this? I wonder if it's actually the opposite. That 2 weeks ago they might have known, well, we can do that on that date. If you see what I mean, we can keep exploring our options, see what else is out there. You get to this date, we could press this button, activate this one if we wanted to. Not least because I think in order to get the papers around the finance and stuff, that might have taken a few days and all those little bits and pieces. I wonder whether or not they've not been entirely 100%, but they've known there's this if we want it. Just sort of see what I mean.
I know exactly what you mean. The only thing with that is I think the whole thing around it's been too quiet for that.
Okay.
Like, there was nothing about it until, what, was it Wednesday or was it Thursday?
Wednesday last week.
It was Wednesday or Thursday.
They are good at keeping it all under wraps, though, aren't they?
They are, but the McAllister one, for example, that wasn't under wraps. That was coming. You could see that
was an exception.
You could see that like a double-decker bus on a country lane. That was coming.
I mean, didn't we invite his dad to a Champions League game like in the middle of March? That's probably a bit of a clue.
Well, McAllister's dad.
Yeah.
Let's be clear whose dad we're talking about.
Yeah,
Szoboszlai's dad. We don't know what Szoboszlai's dad's up to.
No, it could be up to anything.
It could be up to anything.
But on it, Mo, are you excited? He's 22. I love the way he profiles. I think there's loads in there. There's obviously loads and loads of room for development as well. Let's be clear about that. But that's what the footballer himself seems to want. It appears to be part of why he's chosen Liverpool. For me, I am excited. I think there's a real sort of there's something quite straightforward about it.
Yeah. It feels like we are the perfect, as it stands at the moment, it feels like we're the perfect team for what he wants and he's a perfect player for what we need. And that's always a good relationship. I am excited. I know Leipzig have got a reputation for selling all their players whenever, but I honestly thought they'd keep hold of him this summer. I thought this time next year he would be the guy. I think he was been one of a good range of players in the Leipzig side without always being the guy who's always going to be the go-to guy. I thought with Nkunku leaving, he was going to gravitate towards that. So the fact that we've got him now and he can maybe do that on our books is probably a really, really good thing. There are obviously going to be questions and marks around some of the things about him. Like I mentioned, consistency. He sometimes you want him to be great and he hasn't been great. But I think he's got all the tools you need to develop into a fantastic player for Liverpool.
For me, Harriet, there's a real clean upgrade on Henderson sort of move here in the shape that we've been playing. Certainly from an attacking point of view, defensive stuff may need a little bit of work. But for me, there's a real sort of, you can see immediately what he can offer in that position in terms of being able to take it up a level. On Henderson, on Elliott, you can see really, really quickly what it is that he could bring, where you can go, okay, day one, this can be better, this can be different, this can function in a whole new way.
Well, first things first, you might see shots going from outside the box actually end up in the back of the net, which would be a really nice thing, wouldn't it? Because too many times...
We'll coach this out of him.
Yeah, that'll change real quick. But yeah, I think if you look at some of the characteristics that he's got, he can really fit into either the Henderson or the Elliott role, because those two things are quite different. In terms of the Elliott role playing really close to Salah, I think he'll be the one to offer the through balls, he'll be the one to offer the creativity, he'll allow Salah to move close to goal in different periods of the game. So I think in that side, you can really see how he's got the attributes to fit in well there. But the Henderson role is the big one for me. The fact that he's seems to be really good, and particularly last season, something that was a strength of his game of winning the ball back in key areas. His pressing game, pressure regains are really strong. And I like that he's got that balance between the defensive and the attacking attributes, and that is exactly what you need from a Klopp-style midfielder, and he's been playing in a team where he's used to playing a high-intensity style of football. And that's what this signing really signals for me, is the fact that next season Klopp wants to go back to where you are winning the ball back high up the pitch, where you have got that intensity. I feel like at times last season, he had to stray away from that because of the personnel, because of the fact everyone looked just a bit knackered and like they couldn't play to the style and intensity that Klopp wanted. This is a signing where I think he comes in and you know that he's going to be able to put the groundwork in. He's got the legs. He's only 22 years old. He's played the right amount of football. He's, like I said, really good in a pressing situation. He's going to win the ball back, hopefully, in dangerous areas and be a real attacking threat. And so, yeah, really excited about it, and nice to come back from holiday for a week and to have a new player and to listen to all Anfield Wrap's lovely content as well.
I think my favourite thing about him, based on what you just said there, is that the pressing and the defensive side of his game is a new thing. Like, it was something that he was challenged by his manager. Yeah. And if you look at his career, even was only at Leipzig for 2.5 years, he was given a new challenge by each different manager. He played one season out on the left, played one season out on the right. Then, as I say, he was asked to do more defensive capabilities. He's still able to have his best scoring season while doing that. So he's still at the stage where not only is he able to add things to his game, he's picking them up quickly. And that's something that we're really going to need, because we don't know necessarily if we're going to be playing one new system or we're going to be flitting between 2 or 3 systems. Either way, he's going to need to be up to speed quickly. And I think this gives us a real chance of that happening.
It's 2 players now as well, with McAllister and him, that can play in a variety of different positions. And I think with that versatility and us not knowing exactly what style of play we're going to have next season, what system we're going to play, I don't even think that's just us. I think that's the manager himself as well. I think he'll go into it with a bit of, you know, flexibility of, do I still want to play the box in midfield, or I want to go back to a 3? The players that they're bringing in can play in both of those systems. I think that's a strength to both of them. And yeah, that versatility is going to be something that's going to be relied upon a lot next season.
I think as part of, you know, the upgrade aspect, Phil, for me, we got to see the good thing about the running games, whilst we'd love to have won all 9, was it was useful to see where it can go a little bit wrong. In the period as well. And I think that, you know, sometimes you learn more. Often you learn more from when it goes wrong than when it's going right and going quite smoothly. And, you know, I feel as though you were able to see where the creative onus will or won't be on this, where you also need the consistency as well. I feel as though there is a lot of pressure on whoever those 2 midfielders / attackers are who play the highest in this shape, however you want to write it down. You know, you need them to be constantly involved. You need them to constantly be on the game. And that is, you know, it's a big ask of a 22-year-old, don't get me wrong, but that is the task that's likely to be in front of him as if Liverpool are going to continue with this shape.
I think the interesting thing about it is more the going backwards element, to be honest. And I know that might sound a bit like, hang on, where did this come from? But if you sort of think about, part of the thing is we leave a huge vacant area in right back quite a lot of the time. So what you actually need is basically 3 people to sort of always be conscious that they need to cover that position. One of them is Trent. One of them is obviously the other holder midfielder. But I think there's going to be an element of it on Szoboszlai as well, because I think what this might see is, I think we've seen lots of Salah being very wide. In, you know, at the start of last season, it was a real theme that was annoying plenty of people, and rightly so, because we were sort of taken away from goal. But what I think this might do is, I think it might move him closer to the centre forward. It might see the left winger move back a little bit deeper, which then gives the opportunity for Fabinho to push over a bit more, because McAllister is able to drop into a bit of space, and it sort of it pivots a lot of people right. Because I think there's a thing with Diaz, for example, where I don't think he's a front 3 player. I don't think he's got the sort of the bit within him where he's going to possibly weigh in with 20, 25 goals a season. I just don't think that's him. But what he can do is he can come back and pick the ball from deep a lot better. He can go inside, he can go outside, but it gives the ability for sort of Fabinho or maybe McAllister and Trent and Szoboszlai to have to cover a smaller amount of space. And I think that's where the pre-season's really interesting in figuring this out, because as you were talking about, there were flaws to it. And it's now about figuring out how you get rid of these flaws and give people sort of less to do whilst not mitigating on what the club does going forward.
Yeah, on that note as well, I think one of his strengths is being really good in compact spaces. And I think you saw a lot of times with the new system that a lot of the players were bunched really close together. And at times could sense that they were struggling to find space within that system and struggling to kind of find their own creative freedom. And something I like about what I've seen of him and what the stats show is that he's really good in those little areas where there is only a little pocket of space to break into, and he manages to find it. And that directness is something I think Liverpool were lacking at times last season. Too many times they looked backwards, too many times they weren't entirely sure whether they had the ability of themselves on the ball or the trust of themselves to drive it forward without losing it in dangerous areas. And he'll bring that real directness, and hopefully that will lead to more goals, because I think we need a few more of those.
Jesse Marsh said in 2020, described him as a modern-day David Beckham. He was his manager at Salzburg and Leipzig. Beckham had a real ability to hook a ball, and he could also chop it when he needed to. Szoboszlai can hit a ball in a number of different ways, and he's got power. I think the idea of him needing to be worried about is the big thing for me, Mo, in terms of what he can do to the opposition. It's not even literally what he actually does, although obviously over a period of time you want to see that. It's that you can't have the attitude. I thought last season one of the things that was interesting when we were playing the new approach was how often, because the opposition were worried about Trent, the pass that they were cutting off for Canate was to Trent. But then Salah would make himself available feet. It'd go 30 yards up the line to Salah, and then Henderson would make the run beyond Salah. And often Salah would release Henderson in that space. But Jordan's Jordan. And there's some sort of point there where he's not going to run at a defender. It helped Liverpool get up the pitch. Jordan then holds the ball. Liverpool starts again. But the idea of someone who can sometimes do that, hold the ball, let everyone get up the pitch. But the idea of someone who can sometimes go, actually, I'm going to take you on one-on-one.
Yes.
And I can deliver as well in that action. I think the idea of there being another footballer the opposition need to worry about if we're going to keep playing this shape is really important.
Yeah, I mean, it is like a big chess game. And once someone has kind of made a move that counters one of your moves, you then have to then counter the counter. And I think that's exactly what it is. I think the other thing with Szoboszlai, as Harriet mentioned before, his shooting ability. And I think it's funny the David Beckham quote, because us as English, we have very different perceptions of what that means compared to everyone else. For everyone else, he's just a very, very good footballer. So it is a compliment. And I think what he meant was in terms of his ball striking and how much care and attention he puts into it and how good he is at it and how reliable he is with it. That's a very good thing to have. So I think a big weapon is going to be if he can score a goal from 25, 30 yards in the first 4 or 5 games, because then suddenly all teams are going to start going, oh, well, we can't leave him in space there. And that, again, makes the other space further away. And even if it's just the threat of it, I mean, we saw sometimes in the Coutinho era and even going back to John Anarisa, when someone can, they don't always have to be effective. And particularly if he's got the quality to play through balls once that space arrives, then yeah, if we're playing against packed defences, it's going to make their job so much harder.
That 16 yards, Phil, to 22 yards is what I'd sort of say Liverpool need to improve on around the attempts from distance. I think once you get beyond 22 yards, you are at times sort of buying a raffle ticket. But the idea that if a defence is pretty well set, and then you can roll it back to someone, you know, there's a whole reel of Ilkay Gundogan goals that are based around this at the moment, knocking around. Very easy to point out. That's the key area. That was what Chamberlain was good at when he first arrived at Liverpool as well. That was the area where you felt as though he was going to do his business. The idea of Liverpool having the threat in that area, I think, is really useful because, as Mo says, it's not so much the idea every single one's got to go in the top corner. It's more the idea that means there's one, possibly two men who are looking to close you down, at which point it's easy to find a pass.
Yeah, it's not. You don't even have to have the shot. That's the thing about it is it's not that you will shoot or you will score. It's that we were probably in a position for 2-3 years where it's like, well, they can have the ball there because they're probably not going to shoot, and it enables them to sort of organise. They can go, well, they're going to do this, they're going to do this. Preparation football teams do, you know, a day, 2 days before a game is necessarily about how we win. It's about how we stop them from doing what they're good at and cutting down on allowing them to do what they want to do. And if you know that a team's not going to shoot from distance, you don't need to do anything, do you? Like, whereas now they're looking at this and going, oh, hello, I think it's interesting we played Chelsea away on the first day because they were a goalkeeper who really struggles with the idea of saving things that are kicked at him from 25 yards. If it's 10 yards away, he'll probably save it. But if it's 30 yards out, he'll look at it and go, what on earth's that? So it's a nice game for us to have. But it also is one where it would be very visibly something that you can go, well, they're going to do this. You might not necessarily, as I said, do it, but they just need to think that you're going to do it. And it's such a huge advantage. It gives you something that you can go, well, you don't know what we're going to do. And there's a level of unpredictability that I don't think Liverpool have had. You've talked about sort of not passing the ball to Henderson in certain situations. And they know that you're not going to pass it to him. Whereas this, they go, well, you could pass it to him. And he might do this. And they have to think about this.
What do you think this tells us, Phil? You've just said there that the shape may change again. I think there's always been more flexibility in Klopp's football than people give it credit for when he's been at Liverpool. But this does suggest to me that first part of this, the idea of Konate doing a bit of a hybrid role, Trent Alexander-Arnold doing a bit of a hybrid role, Fabinho, like whoever is in where Fabinho's been playing, likely to play to the left, therefore, of that feels though start there. I think that this signing to me suggests that that's here to stay as Liverpool's go-to 80% of the time, say.
Yeah, I think that's completely the case now. I think we can sit here and go, that's what we're going to do. It might not be exactly as it was. Players might be doing slightly different things. And as I said a couple of minutes ago, there will be an element of let's make his job easier, because I think there was a period where Konate looked like he had the hardest job in the entire sport of football. Yes. Not like, oh, this is quite hard. It's like there's no one doing what you're doing. He was playing centre-back, he was playing right-back, he was playing sweeper, he was doing everything. And you see it come to a head in that Villa game where he gives the penalty away and he's just exposed, and they managed to sort of work it out and go, right, well, we can get in down that flank. He's quick, but, so is Ollie Watkins. And now what we've got to do is, A, we've got to stop the ball from being able to get there, and B, also give him less room to have to get there. I know we're going to come on to it later, but this is why I think the Lavia thing is quite interesting in terms of a mobility thing, because I don't just think it's necessarily about players being able to do it. It's about players being able to get from A to B very quickly, and that's, I think, one area where we might see Fabinho struggle, and why I think Fabinho's been excellent. It's not even to do with the sort of the way he dropped off last year, because he did recover, but at the same time, I don't think what he has and what his sort of attributes are necessarily perfect to the role as it might well develop into.
It's recovery pace, isn't it? And I think that's what he lacked at times last season when Konate was out of position. Exactly, yeah.
No, I was just going to agree. It's like he was a bit of a cone once the ball had gone. And I think we talk about players having the ability to play in different positions, have different abilities. That mobility, I think, is probably going to be very high up on the priority list for everyone who comes into midfield.
You mentioned before, Harriet, about the goals. If you take out the 3 big wins, and people don't like it when you do things like that because they go, well, it counts. My point is more, if you take out City's 3 big wins, for instance, and I don't even think in the same way the 6-3 against Manchester United counts, because that's like a 3-0. It's a 4-1. They wouldn't buy that amount.
There are anomalies in the data.
Yes, there are anomalies in the data. But even if you take out City's 3 biggest wins, they still score 78 goals from 35 games. If you take out Liverpool's 3 biggest wins, it goes down to 52 goals in 35 games. I think because there was a lot of focus on issues of sides getting at us last season, at least I think it actually made the attacking less secure in and of itself. People were nervous. They felt they were under pressure. But that said, I think part of what the attack didn't do, a really good example, for instance, a game like Bournemouth away, when Liverpool were very much on top, they didn't get themselves into a position where they could convert that game from there. I think Liverpool do need to attack better, and I think that's a massive. It seems obvious to say it when you're talking about buying an attacker, but I think that's an obvious sort of part of this sign, and Liverpool want to improve in that area as well and need to.
Yeah, well, there was no flow in so many games, and like I mentioned earlier, a real lack of directness. And I actually don't think it's the finishing ability that needs to be worked on; it's the supply. And I think that's why bringing a player in like him is really key, because we mentioned the through balls, we mentioned the fact that he is a real facilitator, and he will allow the other players, in particular Salah on that right hand side, to get close to goal. And I think as well, you mentioned it on one of the transfer stat shows, when he's playing in these little triangles, he's the one that can really put the balls into dangerous areas. And there is a lovely Athletic article where they've got all like the pictures of the balls that he's put in, and I think that's one of the key things. But yeah, it's not just conceding goals that was our problem last season. It really was that lack of supply into the front three. It really was Salah's positioning. It really was getting players in the right place where they could actually be a threat. So much of that was missing, and there was times where, as a fan and watching it on TV or in the stadium, you could see where the pockets of space were, but on the pitch the players were struggling to just find those pockets, and they were looking backwards far too much. I think the signings we're seeing coming in now suggests that they know that those are areas that need addressing. They know we need more goals, and hopefully they'll have the confidence to do that and push forward more when they've got players on the pitch that they can trust to do that. And
it was still a thing even in some tough home games after the we did change the formation. If you think we play Nottingham Forest, we score 3 goals from set pieces. We play Brentford, we score a goal from a set piece. We play Fulham, we score a penalty. So even after the Arsenal game, I think there's 4 home games after Arsenal. Yeah. There's only 1 goal from open play. Like,
with the exception of the game against Spurs.
Yes, sorry, yeah, I completely forgot. I completely forgot about the game against Spurs, but I think that was more down to Spurs being utterly insane.
It would be fair. It would be fair.
You remember more than most.
It would also be fair to describe Spurs as the main protagonist of the football match against Spurs.
Yes, that's a fair point.
Yeah.
You learn nothing about yourself, you learn everything about Tottenham. But it sort of does mean that there was a little bit of an issue that needed sorting out. And Spurs, probably in fairness, not quite the same type of team who are going to have the same approach anyway, in terms of when you look at like Brentford, Fulham, Aston Villa and Forest, who come into Anfield, they'll probably be very happy to sit in and defend, and they're not got Harry Kane up front trying to feed him. They're happy to sort of let you come onto them, and if you close off as much space as they can and go, well, you break us down then. And we win 3 of those games, we get 10 points from those 4 games, but it was still a bit like, hang on, there's something that needs working out here, and this is the type of thing the signings are addressing, because the footballers on the pitch were good footballers, but they just didn't quite have that little thing to carry you to the next level and sort of consistently bully and break down these teams.
There was also an inconsistency in terms of the starting lineup because of injuries and because of lack of reliability of certain players. And I think when you had players being dropped in, week out, and it was constantly changing, there was a lack of individuals knowing their job, and that made things a little bit more risk averse. It meant that things just didn't flow, like I mentioned earlier, in the way they were meant to. Hopefully bringing in players that can actually start the majority of football games this season when they're needed will help that just in and of itself.
Well, I think if you think about some of the players who have struggled with what we've asked them to do at any point this season, if we are going to this kind of box midfield, or however you want to call it, the more we spend planning and time around it and training on it, the better everyone's going to get. So the players who maybe didn't get it last season might find that they find it easier this season. The players that we're bringing in might make it easier for those said players. I think of Núñez in particular. If you think all the things we were saying before about Szoboszlai, about his delivery, about his ability to find the pass, that's meat and drink to Núñez. That's exactly what he needs. Another guy who can find him in places. And if our midfield is going to be more energetic, if our midfield is going to be winning the ball further up the pitch, that means that we're going to be gaining the ball closer to the goal, which means that there's less for him to do. He's basically got, we've won the ball, I'm off. Like it basically narrows his options dramatically, and then we can just get to him becoming a more comfortable finisher, and suddenly the whole team's going to look different.
Exactly that. Liverpool last season against the bottom 10, 6 of those games against the bottom 10, they failed to score in away from home. Crystal Palace, Chelsea, Bournemouth, Nottingham Forest, Everton and Wolverhampton Wanderers were the 6 that they failed to score in away from home last season against the bottom 10. You're not going to achieve anything if you're doing that sort of thing. The sides in the bottom half of Liverpool did manage to score against West Ham, absolutely fine, won the Europa Conference League, really good side. And the 3 who went down. We're going to have to play the others again this season is my main point there. However sad that might make some of us listening. Moving ourselves along, we've got Ian Salmon talking right now about Billy Kenny. It was filmed with me last week, so if you've got it as a video, it's there as well. So here is Ian Salmon talking about Billy Kenny. Joined by Ian Salmon to talk about whatever happened to Billy Kenny, which is not an Everton play, I believe.
It's not an Everton play. It's by an ex-Everton footballer, but it's not an Everton play. He does spend the first hour becoming an Everton footballer and picking up an injury. The second act goes somewhere else altogether. It's the rest of his life, and the rest of his life
I mean, it'd be all right if it was an Everton play, because there's lots of good stories to be told about Everton Football Club, but it's bigger than that. It's
about the ambition of the working class. It's about a lad who's born in Burlington Street, just between Scotty and Voxey. For anybody outside Liverpool, Scotland Road and Vauxhall Road. The road's going into town, main channel out to the north end. But he's born literally there. He's born in basically tenements piled on top of each other, and he's resolutely working class, even though his dad played for Everton in the 70s, but it was before there was any real money in the game. It was a short career. So Billy's born into basically a struggling period in Liverpool's history, and he grows up with the only thing he has is this desire to play for Everton Football Club. Could have played for us, could have played for United. Ferguson wanted him really, really badly. Ferguson has him at United for, I think, 6 weeks across the summer.
Really?
Yeah. Plays with Ryan Giggs. He used to play against Ryan Giggs all the time. He played with Ryan Giggs. So he's coming up at that period. And he basically, Ferguson says to Brian Kidd in front of him, this is my boy. This is what we need. This is what we need at United. But he only ever wanted to go to one place. He had better offers from United and from Liverpool. And he grew up hating Liverpool, obviously with a vengeance, as is his job as a bloke.
Yep.
But speaks very highly of Kenny, because he was there under Kenny for a few weeks when he was on trial there, and loved the experience. He went down to Wembley in '88 for the cup final.
Must have been delighted.
He was delighted, but he was wearing a Liverpool trackie, so he'd never lived that one down.
So the play's been successful.
Yeah,
it's gone really, really well.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a change of direction for you. I think it's the first time you've done anything football. Is that right?
Well, those 2 weeks is tangentially football because it's about the 2 weeks before Hillsborough. But the one thing I wanted to make that play about was not about football.
Exactly, yeah.
And to make it about what life was like. This is directly about football and directly about addiction and mental health and what injury does and how your upbringing in the area you come from constrains the expectations that you're given.
And have you enjoyed the process of this one?
It's been absolutely fantastic. It's been an absolute joy to, well, it's terrible to say it's been an absolute joy to because it's a really dark story. Basically, Billy's girlfriend saw Jay Johnson, the actor, in a viral video called Lads, 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 which people may have seen. He's walking around like Everton Brow, walking around town, a poem about men's mental health. And Jackie, Billy's girlfriend, says to Billy, he'd be great as you, wouldn't he? And Billy wasn't overly anything, you know. But Jackie approached Jay. Jay approached Mikey, who directed Comeback Special in those 2 weeks with me. And Mikey approached me and said, do you fancy doing this? Basically, Mikey went, Jay, Ian, Jay, sit down and have a conversation. We sat down and had a conversation for an hour. A week later, we were sitting in a room with Billy himself. And we basically did about 4 hours of Billy one day, 4 hours another day. The whole play was told from Billy's words. So everything that's in it has come directly from Billy to us. And then it's been a case of taking what was pertinent and moving it around.
That's a really interesting process, though, you know, to literally tell that story and get, so almost word for word, get that story in that sense. It's just a really interesting storytelling process. I mean, you must have enjoyed that.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, it's that weird thing of, you know, from, you know, in terms of writing the film, the actual storytelling is one thing, but in this, you don't start off with, well, you never start with a blank canvas because you start with the costs and you start with, you know, everything changes the blank canvas. But this is the case starting with our interview with Billy, podcasts Billy had been on, interviews Billy had done on websites and in papers.
Got the voice from minute one.
Got the absolute voice from minute one, so could speak as Billy immediately. But then the weird thing is you can go into the rehearsal room with the actor and you're using Billy's actual words verbatim. It doesn't necessarily mean that they sound right on stage. Yeah. There's a moment in the second act where Billy summed it up by saying, bittersweet, a life. And we looked at it, going through it, we couldn't make it work in the play because it sounded too poetic to be spoken by the character. Yeah. It was the one line in the play that sounded like a playwright had written it. Yeah. And everything sounded like Billy Kenny had said it, and I'd gone, I'll have that bit there. But no, there were loads of bits where I'd massage little things. You know, the commentary for the Derby match itself is my commentary from sitting watching the Derby on repeat. And then this bit here is Billy's perfect summation of his life, but we couldn't make it land dramatically on stage. Sneaked a bit of it in on the last couple of nights, once, you know, you've warmed up and you're flying with a bit. But the story's a tragedy. For those who don't know, I don't know how much you know, he's man of the match in the Derby in '92. He's 19, he's on 35 quid as a YTS, and he's running the Merseyside Derby in a brilliant way. He's looking at, he goes away with England under 21s, he's looking at Paul Linton going, I could have your shirt. I mean, he's saying to us, he was a great player, Ince's a great player, but I reckoned I could just do a bit more of my range of passing, my physicality, I could do more. Billy knows what talent he had. And most people in football in Liverpool know what Billy had in terms of talent. Jay has spoken to people who've been involved in football for a long time and asked them who was the best young talent he worked with, you know, Gerrard or Rooney, and they said no, it's Billy Kenny. By a mile, that's how highly he was held. And at the end of his first season, he gets shin splints, he gets compartment syndrome in his calf, which basically means your calf muscle has grown too big for the skin that's contained in. He has 2 operations, 42 stitches in each leg. And at the point that he has the operations, he starts drinking. And drinking in Liverpool in the early 90s with the whole dance scene leads to ecstasy, leads to cocaine, leads to 25 years of addiction to cocaine. And so the second half is his journey through exactly how dark his life becomes. And at the same time, you sit down with Billy and he's one of these people you warm to immediately because he's just a lovely bloke and he's very open and he'll tell you anything about himself. And no matter how dark it was, there's bits in there that are just absolutely funny.
So it is on at the Bombed Out Church. When?
21st July is part of the Liverpool Theatre Festival, which is an excellent festival. Did the Blundell Church. I had a play in it last year and the year before. Lovely place to play. It's a great place. And yeah, we're doing 21st July, one night only. It's possibly the last time we do it because Jay, whose venture it basically is, really, he's got a month at the Royal Court coming up in August, and he's got TV work coming up, and nobody else is stepping in and doing the part because it's his show. So this may be the last time you get a chance to see it.
Maybe the last time you get a chance to see it. Get down 21st, Friday the 21st at the Blundell Church. We are back and we are talking about what we're expecting from here in terms of numbers. Before then, across the course of last week, we had 10 separate shows about Dominik Szoboszlai coming to Liverpool. We had Jasmine Barber, Rafa Honigstein, Aranossi Aaron, well done Neil in the end, Sebastian Steer, Christian Falk, Paul Gorst, and the wonderful Guido Schaefer, although I love them all equally. Guido is the man I'm desperate to go for a pint with, though, and I'm not going to lie to you about that one. All of that happened last week. He obviously had a lot of Gutman in there as well, and I did a stat show supported by StatsBomb. 10 different things across the course of the 2 or 3 days. Do subscribe if you haven't thought to do so already. Do support the Anfield Wrap. We are slightly changing what we're doing from this point onwards. I say slightly, actually quite a marked change, but we think it is significantly for the better. There will be no more Tour Live from this point. There will be another free show for the next couple of weeks. Will be coming out, so there'll be a couple of free shows that we're going to put out on a Friday, and then for the whole of next season, we're going to put Friday's show out for free over the course of the campaign. So that would be replacing Tour Live. We're going to remove Talking Reds on, get rid of that, but we're going to be doing more impromptu lives over the course of the campaign when there is definitely something to talk about on video. And there's a number of new shows coming on audio and video as well. I will be writing an email this week, as I'm back to writing emails that detail what that process is. It was meant to be last Friday, but then events got us all carried away, and you found yourself creating these 10 pieces of content.
How many?
10. 10. You were away. You must have been overwhelmed.
You did it all without me. I was made up, to be honest.
My God, how is the this now? How is the this now?
That many pieces the Vidi printer would have had to spell.
It would have had to spell. Indeed, it would have had to spell. Let's talk about what we expect from Liverpool in terms of numbers. The Lavia links are hotting up, Mo. I feel as though there is a general sense there's a third midfielder. I think there's a general sense there's a third midfielder this week. Is that fair? And if it is, what else are you expecting?
Yeah, I always thought 3 felt like the safest number to go for if you're going to say how many you think we'll get. And it appears now that Lavia seems to be the one who we're moving forward on after a long time spent talking about Kefren Turam, and probably did at least 10 shows on him as well.
What Harriet doesn't know about Kefren Turam isn't worth knowing. Knows more than his mother does.
Yeah, you were there for those ones, I remember.
Shoe size.
Yeah.
She could get him a suit made, probably.
Welcome to Liverpool suit. Well, maybe not now. But yeah, the thing I've liked about these last couple of days, and almost kind of puts faith back in the good things Liverpool have done in the transfer market, is when they hit the go button, and things start to move. And it appears that the go button has been hit again with Romeo Lavia. What that doesn't necessarily mean is that if they've got further down the line with Thuram, that there isn't something that they can do late. Because the thing with Lavia at the moment is that lots of teams have been interested in him. I think Chelsea wanted to buy him after a month of him being at Southampton, but no one wants to pay 50 million quid for him because they all think he's good, but 50 million quid. I think there was an article in The Athletic a couple of days ago about Chelsea's woes in the transfer market, and one of their big issues was spending big money on players who are technically squad players. And if we look at the makeup of where we are at the moment, I still believe that Lavia wouldn't be going into the season as expecting to start the first few games. So 50 million in that context does feel a little bit steep, even though he's very young and ticks a lot of the boxes. So I think while we are very much committing to the idea of wanting to sign him, I don't think this is one that we're definitely going to be like bang, 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 because Southampton so far have been reluctant to lower the price. That's kind of what moved Arsenal away. But I still think that we need to bring in a defender as well. So I wonder whether or not, if we do end up going 50 million for Lavia, this affects that. And if so, what are the knock-on effects of who else is still around the building?
We'll come on to what we're expecting if Lavia does indeed come in, Phil, in a minute or two. I think the fee point, it's worth pointing out, Southampton paid 14 million for him. That came with some risk. For me, there's a couple of things that are an issue. around the valuation of the player. First and foremost, the fact that he will qualify as homegrown, as in when he reaches the correct age because of his background. The other thing is, the thing that Southampton know is there is the City buyback for 40 million next summer. And so you're almost in a bit of a situation here where I can understand why Southampton will be really determined to hold the line on the fee, because their attitude will be effectively, because they may well have a confidence, they may well have been tipped a wink by City, they might be being misled, but they may well have a confidence that this footballer would, City may be interested in buying him back next summer. That allows them, I think, to say, well, this is the cost of us not having the footballer for this year on top. That's the premium that they're looking to charge and looking to pay. Maybe I'm completely wrong, but I do sort of think it's that, which means that Liverpool, I struggle to see how they get him for less than 40 million, let me put it that way. Maybe I'm wrong.
Oh, no, I would agree with that completely. The only thing I don't buy in that as a theory is that it probably went out the window when he got relegated. Like, if they'd have not got relegated, I think that would stand up perfectly and make loads of sense, but he's not doing a season in the Championship, is he? Like, there's a way he finds his way out. There's a way they almost have to go, look, 40, 45 million quid would do a lot for Southampton this summer, because they're going to need to, I would suspect they'll probably need to do a lot of work themselves, and 40 million quid at that level will enable them to probably, if they do it right, they've already got a manager, you can probably see a world where they get promoted quite comfortably if they spend that money correctly. Like, I mean, there's even something we could do. The way they're going to play, there's an argument where you look at him and go, tell you what, would you like Bajcetic for the year? Because the numbers we would have in that situation probably enable you to do that. But you've got to find these opportunities for people, and that might be a way where you can sort of sweeten it. I'm not saying we will do that. It's just sort of something that you could do to put it more in their favour. But that is a lot of money. It's a lot of money, but I think he could be here for a very long time, because he looks very talented. He looks.
Do you really like him?
I like him. I think the thing when Mo was talking about numbers before, I think I was happy with 2, but if it was a third one, I wanted a sort of project, and he feels like a project for Klopp to sort of go, right, I'm having this out of you. He gets a year to sort of play with Thiago and Fabinho and learn about being a deep line midfielder, and I think you get so much out of him moving forward. I just think I think he looks fantastic.
Would you have if you had to pick between him and Thuram, would you pick him?
I'd have him. Yeah, I think he's more. I think he needs less moulding, and from what I've seen of him, there was obviously, I think he'd be fine with it, but there is also a question of whether Thuram adapts to English football and the demands, and French football is quite a good place to buy from that position because of the physicality and stuff, but Lavia's played in midfield in Premier League games. Even for a poor team, he looked very good. There were some games at the start of last season, I think he came to Anfield, he looked pretty good. He scored a goal against Chelsea, which was just, ironically, it was the 18, 20 yards outside the box, and he puts it in the bottom corner. I think he just looks like a player you should be interested in, and he's one of those where if you sort of don't pay a 5 million quid extra, then, if you draw a line at 5 million quid in 3-4 years' time, you're looking pretty stupid.
I really like him. I'm going to start with that, and I take your point on the project, and I'd like to see a project come in maybe more in the left-sided central defence position. But do you not think when you're talking about projects in the number 6 role, you're just talking about Bajcetic? Like, isn't that not going to detract from what they're trying to do with him? I think they've got a lot of the same qualities. They've both shown a certain amount of maturity. They've both shown that they're good in a tackle, last-ditch interceptions. I like Lavia a lot, and I'd like to see him come to Liverpool. But if you're thinking about developing a project, are you not getting a similar player? Would it not detract from what they're trying to do with his development?
The only thing I'm not sure what his position is, Bajcetic, yet, which is obviously fine at 18 years of age, but I think he might be a little bit further forward. So
then where's he going to get the opportunities?
Well, exactly. And that's sort of why I'm a bit like, maybe we need to look at something for him, especially if we're signing 3 and then all of a sudden we've got, 8 midfielders. Like,
Bajcetic is the one I want to see.
I think he's fantastic. Like, I think he's absolutely brilliant. To see the moment I saw him in that friendly against Manchester United last summer, I was like, right, well, he is clearly here for a number of years and he is very good. It's just, I want to see him develop, and I'm a bit unsure as to, at the minute, where do you want to play him? Like, I thought the Real Madrid game, I think he's obviously very talented, but there was a level of naivety that, and obviously we don't have Champions League football to throw him in, and that is absolutely fine for someone of his age. This isn't in any way, shape or form a criticism of him. It's just you've got to get him making the right decisions, and he needs to be in a position where he can learn to make the right decisions. After their equaliser, Real Madrid equalised, and Henderson's basically like got 2 hands on his shoulders, and he's like, "Come on, he made a rash decision. Obviously, it's still deflected in off Vinicius Junior's foot, but he still made a bad decision for us to get there. And Henderson looked a bit like, come on.
But Lavia's got those mistakes as well. We saw it when they played us.
But my bad message thing, Phil, is I wonder whether or not he's the one who looks most naturally in a position to perhaps. I'd like to see 45 minutes of a minimum covering for what Trent's doing. That could work really, really nicely in this. If you're trying to look for a place, so it's more progressive than just sort of a classic number 6 position. On the one hand, he's got a defensive background. On the other, he's physically relatively imposing, even though he's of relatively tender years. I wonder whether, a lot of this comes down to what it is that we see in pre-season and what it is the manager sees and what he sees in the training. But I feel as though there's that for him. I mean, it's a little bit of us going off to one side on it. Harriet, what's your Lavia position? How are you feeling about him at this point?
Yeah, I like him and I like the kind of profile that he is. And I do think it would be nice to bring another number 6 in, whether they are more of a development project or whether they are more established. But that is my only concern, what I've already said. But in terms of him as a player, I think he's shown a real level of maturity. I think he's shown that he deals well with pressure in the Premier League. And for a 19-year-old or 18 when he was playing last season, that's really impressive. He's really good in a tackle. He's obviously still very raw. He gives away a lot of yellow cards, but we've seen that with someone like Fabinho and he's much more experienced.
Quite like more yellow cards at times.
Yeah, sometimes more yellow cards, but sometimes, you need to show that composure. And I think that's the side of his game that he definitely needs to work on. But I think you'd really trust him, even at 19 years old, to be kind of the last man in a tackle. And he could be the last man that would sweep things up a bit more. And that's the qualities about him that I think you could really hone, you could really work on, and that under the new system in particular would really benefit Liverpool. But I just wonder how much game time he'd get, whether he'd get those chances for the next couple of seasons when he's been used to playing quite a lot of football. Is he going to want that? So there is question marks over it. But as a player and as a profile, really impressed with him, really like him, think he'd do really well. I'm just not entirely sure where he fits in terms of the numbers game that we've got in midfield at the moment. Having said that, I would still like another midfielder. So I'm kind of contradicting myself.
We're all contradicting ourselves here. This is the point. On the yellows thing, a lot of yellows but no reds. I always take that as a good sign.
Yeah, true.
It means that he's got a good head on him, knows how to deal with things. And in this Liverpool midfield, there's going to be times when you need to take a yellow. I think we've all seen it. And if he can still maintain his composure after that point, that's a big tick for me. I like the fact that he's played in the City system. I like the fact that he talked about his idol being Sergio Busquets. These are both good things because we need someone, as we've mentioned, mobility is going to be massive, but we also need someone who's going to be able to progress the ball when necessary. We need someone who's not going to, the defences aren't going to be able to go, well, we can let him have the ball. And he's great with carrying it forward, so that means that when we are playing packed defences, it gives them another break, something to cause more chaos. It makes a lot of sense. But for me, the biggest thing is the knock-on effect of who plays where. Because we need to know who Klopp is expected to play in these certain positions. Because if you think about it, even in your idea, Neil, which I like, by the way, of Bajcetic being the Trent cover, if you're saying those two are being for there, then you've still got Fabinho, Henderson, and then maybe one of those to play in the other side 6. And it just feels like you're asking a lot of players to kind of share not a lot of minutes. I don't know whether or not he's had a conversation with Fabinho or Henderson. I know I feel like I keep saying this, but it seems like the amount of games that they played last season to go to from all of that to a projected really, really small amount feels like a big thing. And I mean, I'm hoping that it happens and he has that conversation, but there's a part of me in the back of my head where he says, like, what if he doesn't?
There's the 5 subs number, but there's also, for me, there is the Europa League, Mo, for the first portion of the season. I think it's important to sort of say it's quite easy for anyone who signs for Liverpool, of any age group really, who Liverpool really like the look of. It's quite straightforward to sort of say, well, you're getting guaranteed 8 starts before the 6th of January, before you'd even worry about a league game. You know, there's room for you to get 8 starts before the 6th of January. Whilst we're working with you on other things, there's then time off the bench. There might be a couple of league starts in there for whoever, because I think whoever they sign, I think they're going to sign one more. And I think it will be the one they want to take that shit from Fabinho over the course of this season or by the start of next. I think that's the journey. But there's loads of time for that journey. You know, I think we've got to try to see the silver linings in the Europa League cloud on this one. And I think that's where I can really envisage whether it is Lavia, whether it's Thuram, I think it gets more complicated if it's Gravenberch, because I think part of why he's leaving Bayern is the idea that he would like to play more football. Exactly. And I think that's a tougher conversation. But the other two, it seems to me to be relatively straightforward. Then in amongst there as well, I think for Fabinho, for Henderson, for Thiago, I feel as though less will be more. You could even make that argument around Harvey Elliott, despite his age. I think that for those players, I think there's been a period where they've been overplayed. For Elliott, it's the start of last season. For Fabinho and Henderson especially, it's the whole of 21-22. I feel like less would be more for both of them.
I agree. I hope, as I say, I hope that's what's happening. I just wonder sometimes whether or not that Klopp has been reluctant to do this in the past. Maybe now we got to the point where we're saying, okay, this has to happen now. It's now or never. So maybe my fears will be unfounded. I hope they are.
We will see, indeed. Just on this, does anyone else wonder if the Lavia thing, Phil? Do you think the Lavia thing might be... I feel a bit like Liverpool are going to have made a decision on this by the end of this week. Could be wrong, but I feel as though they're going to have decided which of Lavia, Thuram and Gravenberch. I think it is just those three. I feel as though the injury for Kone, combined with the fact that to me, always felt like the insurance policy. I think Liverpool might be trying to sort of smoke this whole situation out, because if they do this, it means the manager's going into the first day of pre-season, whether he's got them all or not, right in front of his eyes, knowing who his three are. I feel like Liverpool maybe are now just trying to force the issue a little bit on this, and that's fair.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think one of the things they'll want is, I mean, it does look like they do also want defender. And it kind of feels like...
All right, Phil, we've all read the agenda.
But it was relevant. Yes, I know. It feels like what they're trying to do now is that they can go into pre-season with what was the big problem from last season rectified. And the defender, who... Are we allowed to talk about him now?
Well, that's what we're going to move into. Segue beautifully for me, Phil.
I'll segue for you beautifully. The defender sort of feels like someone who isn't going to be coming in to like firefight. He's going to come in, and it's probably someone who is slightly developmental, isn't first choice, is at best third choice, and that means that you have less need to get them in straight away, and then you can then spend 6 weeks. It doesn't necessarily need to be on the first day of the season, I don't think, in that situation. You would obviously like him in the pre-season setup, but if he's not, he's here for 5 years, he's not here for 5 weeks. So they can then go in and go, right, well, we can do this. You might get to the deadline and the club might go, well, we might need to sell this player. There could be, for example, a team qualifying for the Champions League who think they're going to get in the Champions League through the playoffs, and then they don't, and they're in the Europa League, and all of a sudden they need to make up a shortfall of 25 million quid. And there's lots of things that can happen in your favour when you don't need someone desperately, which is probably the situation with the defence. Although we would all probably like a defender, it's not sort of flashing sirens like the midfield was all season.
I'll come back just quickly once, actually, before we go into the defender, just on the homegrown, non-homegrown thing. Is this something that concerns you? You're very on top of these things. I think you and I are both quite sanguine about this, because if a defender, for instance, comes in, it says to me that one of Matip and Tsimikas are leaving.
That's completely spot on. I think there's a weird thing with it where a lot of people seem to think that the club don't know about it. And it's like, we'll have to give an Adriana a contract and block this space off as if like it's completely going to come as a surprise at the end of January.
Fill the forms in.
Shit, we've got 19. Yeah. What we've done this wrong? How have we managed this, lads? I thought we'd sorted it. And
is there an age thing? Sorry, like if you're bringing in a homegrown player that was under 22, do they not count as homegrown?
So it's more
like Elliot doesn't.
So basically,
does
you have to be. There's a 25-man squad in the Premier League. The only way to be in it is to be 21 or over on a certain date. So I think this year it is the 1st of January 2001. If you're over 20, if you're born after that date,
we're not playing Masters football here, Harriet.
So if you're born after that date, you're in the 25-man squad, which is why Curtis Jones has gone from not being in it last season to being in it.
Oh, okay.
That's the Premier League one. The European one is a bit more complicated in that it's 25 people with the same as that, and then it's 17. It's both of them are 17 non-homegrown and 8 homegrown. But the European one involves an A list and a B list. To be on the A list, you either need to be over the age of 21 or have been not at the club for under 2 years. So, for example, Ben Doak would have to be on the A list to play European football, but you would have to be on the A list as a non-homegrown player because Scottish is foreign for all intents and purposes. So that's So that's one thing that we might not be able to put Ben Doak in the European squad, which is a slight issue. Then you get the 8
Let's just not put Salah in instead.
Well, yeah, there is that. Then you get the 8 sort of homegrown players you can only have 8 if 4 of them are at your own academy, or not necessarily at your own academy. They've done 2 years, I think it is, before the age of 21.
I hope they've got their best woman or man on this, because
Joe Gomez, for example, counts as one of these players. Harvey Elliott will count next season and is just a free one this year. Bajcetic is a free one, even though he was a...
Curtis Jones is one of these players.
Curtis Jones now becomes one of those players as well. So we do have the 4 of them. And I think what the club has been doing the last 3 or 4 years is that they aren't reliant on 4 specific ones, because over the next 3 or 4 years, there's a number of people who will fall into that role. There's big goalkeepers. There's the Brazilian, Pitaluga, the goalkeeper. Then there's Bajcetic, Elliott, there's Doak. There's a lot of people who will become in that criteria, which just makes it a bit easier elsewhere. And it isn't in any way, shape or form a problem. I think it's actually going to be, the only thing is it's going to be tough for us to actually submit a 25-man squad. But at the same time, there's still people like Bajcetic who doesn't count. There's Elliott who doesn't count. And you may not be submitting 25 names, but you still have the numbers, because for all intents and purposes, Harvey Elliott is just a first-team player.
Yeah.
That he isn't 21 years of age at the right time does not take away from the purpose of his existence.
Okay, so we'll move on to the defenders. All the links, Mo, appear to be hooked around this idea of a left-hand sided centre-back who can also do bits at left-back. So we've got Inacio at Sporting. Bastoni sort of appeared weirdly this weekend. Feels as though he would be too expensive, although there is a contractual thing around him. Kilman has been mentioned a couple of times. Not Kilwell.
Coleman.
Yeah. Kilman has been mentioned a couple of times. Colwell appears to be the club's primary choice. I could be wrong, but it feels as though that's the one they've identified. Whether or not that's still possible could be off the back of what Chelsea's situation is with him, and whether or not he'll sign a new deal. And Mickey van der Ven, aka Mickey Longlegs, appear to be the main ones. Christian Falk feels that Pavard persists. I feel as though that's something Liverpool might look to do at the very end of the window or something like that. It wouldn't surprise me if Liverpool, once they've done their outgoings, which we won't quite get to today, are looking at if there's the possibility of a 5th. I am expecting someone who plays in this position to come in.
Me too. And I would be slightly shocked if it wasn't someone who you just mentioned. There's also David Hanko, who came out as well.
Of course, yes.
Which, I mean, I'd add him to that list, but then it's going to be one of those. The Pavard thing still feels like it's being pushed from him and his people rather than us and our people, but I may be wrong on that. Of the list of them, I can't lie, Bastoni does excite me. I feel like it's a pipe dream, because you're right, I think he would be a little bit too expensive. But Inter Milan are mad, and there are lots of things that they're trying to do that they can't do yet. So they might end up thinking, okay, we're going to keep hold of Barella and we're going to keep hold of Lautaro Martinez, but we still want to buy Lukaku, and someone's got to go. I don't know. It might be, I think in terms of the suitability, the way he plays, I think he'd be fantastic for us. But yeah, it might be a bit too expensive. Inacio is the one that makes a lot of sense.
Also has a release, supposedly.
But then I do feel like, despite all what we've just said, I do feel like if we are going to be bringing someone in, the defender might be the one who's more likely to be English, homegrown. So Colwell, I think, is still plan A and would probably be the best fit of them all. Maybe Bastoni aside. But I just don't think Chelsea are going to sell him. I just think that there's enough people. Pochettino is going to be looking at him saying, look, you may have promised me this and this and this. Keep this guy, and then we will talk. Because this is the very beginning of their relationship. And the club selling players that he wants from underneath him, as I believe they've just done with Mason Mount, if they do it twice, then it's absolutely going to fall apart from day one. So I feel like he's going to dig his heels in on Colwell.
Go on. I was going to say, it does feel like that. If that is a thing, that would go down right to the wire, and it would be because Chelsea are looking at their finances and going, right, well, we need to do this or we're in great FFP trouble. There's also the predicament. They have no European football. They're going to find it very difficult to keep players happy this summer, especially one who already doesn't seem happy. So if, how many games have we played by transfer deadline day? 3 or 4?
It's 3.
3. If he's not started those first 3 games, what's he going to be doing?
Do you not think it's got to be someone, though, has an acceptance around not starting all the games, because they're going to be a backup option to Virgil van Dijk?
Sure,
so it's got to be someone who is in there.
We can probably sell him it a bit better than
Yeah,
Chelsea,
then,
I
100%.
imagine.
I'm not saying that Chelsea have the more pulling power in that sense than us, but it's got to be someone. I think that's why that is the position I think you get a development player in, and someone who can learn from Van Dijk and
But also play where Robertson's playing as well.
Yeah, and do a bit of both, and you can maybe then, if they're younger, mould them so that they've got the attributes to play in both of those positions. But it can't be someone who's really established and who's going to be looking to come in week out unless they think they're going to play against Van Dijk in a position. And maybe that would up Van Dijk's game as well, who knows. But I think it's got to be someone a little bit younger, a little bit more project-y to be an understudy to him for a couple of seasons.
That's why I struggle with Bastoni a little bit, to be honest with you, Mo.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, you're right. But then, by the same token, I feel like with Max Kilman, it's a little bit like maybe the other way. Because, I mean, he is already 26 years old. So he's not really going to be wanting to be an understudy either. And you want someone who acknowledges that they are going to be an understudy, but believes that they will be able to usurp them eventually. And
Do you not think it's quite easy it would be easy to sell it to Kilman, though, wouldn't it?
It's the moment move of his life.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yes. But the other thing you've got to factor in is Wolves. And Wolves selling an Englishman to us will be a very high premium. We're not getting it cheap.
That's also very true.
Also very true indeed. Last little thing. Ultimately, I think that people are going to move on, Mo. I think I think it'll be 4 in, then the outs, and then maybe 1 or even possibly 2 more, depending on what the outs are saying. If Liverpool make it known that players are available, I am intrigued to see where that ends up. I think that's also taking shape in and of the signings that are being made.
Yeah, I agree. I think, obviously, there are certain people, other clubs who are interested in some of our maybe fringe players, but they're kind of keeping their powder dry at the moment to see what else we do, to see what they're kind of bidding that they can do about it. But I think Thiago in particular is one who there will be clubs who are thinking that, okay, if Liverpool buy 2 more midfielders, we'll go in there with a bid and see what happens. I think that's a conversation that Liverpool might have. Personally, I'd still be on the side of keeping him because it feels like the guys who we've got now are going to help him do be better than he would have had previously. But there are going to be some players who move on, whether it's we say, you aren't going to get as many games as you want now, you can go and find another club, and then they do or don't. But my question is are we going to be more ruthless around the selling fee? I mean, I feel for poor Nat Phillips. Like, how many times has he got halfway down the line to a deal and then someone's just like, well, no, it's not enough. It's like, we want an extra 3 million or we want an extra 1.5 million. It's like, come on, guys, I'm not going to play. Just like, I've not got much in my pocket, but come on, we can do something here. So, are we going to be more ruthless about the fact that we will not sell above below our valuation, or we need to get rid of X, Y, Z players?
Interesting shift, though, isn't it? Doing all the ins before the outs are sorted. I think that's a changing dynamic that I really like. I want more to come in.
I think it helped that there was so many outs on contracts.
Yeah. Well, yeah, of course, yeah. But in terms of actually selling for a fee, because I think Liverpool have been quite averse to not knowing how much money they're going to get in and then doing a large outgoing, but they seem to be less risk averse around that this year.
It also feels like we probably end up in a situation where everyone we've got, they're happy with them in terms of being able to offer something. Like, there's no like, well, he's useless, get him out the door. It doesn't feel like there is any of that. It feels like, even I think it's quite likely, I think that Matip potentially leaves if we sign a centre-back. But even if that happened, even if he did stay, you go, well, yeah, he feels like the most likely out to me. And you still feel like he's got something to offer next season.
Indeed. We've all got something to offer next season. Everyone is excited. It's good that you are. Do subscribe to the Anfield Wrap as we get closer and closer to pre-season. There'll be more stuff about Liverpool's linked players this week. There's everything you need about the new signing as well. And the other new signing right the way across the board on the Anfield Wrap. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for Jordan Singleton for producing, Harriet Pryor, Mo Stewart and Phil Blundell. It has been the Anfield Wrap this week. Buy more players, Liverpool. It's fun, innit?